Hi everyone, welcome back to Demand Decoded. I'm Dan Stilgo, Marketing Manager at Blend, and joined by Phil Vallander, Co-Founder at Blend. We're back in the studio today to discuss where marketing budget goes to waste. As we know, the spotlight has been on marketers more, I'd say, in the last 12 to 24 months to improve ROI and CAC and get more out of their budget, ultimately. And the pressure is only continuing into 2025 and beyond to do more of that. And let's face it, to be honest, as marketers ourselves, we all want to get better results from our existing budget and exceed our targets. So in this episode of Demand Decoded, we're going to discuss why so much marketing budget is wasted on low ROI activities, common areas that budget is wasted, and how to actually identify where budget is wasted in your business, and how to avoid dumping money into poor ROI activities in the future. This podcast is brought to you by Blend. We're a B2B website and demand generation agency. We work with ambitious businesses just like yours to create and execute effective demand generation strategies that drive pipeline for your business. We also recognize that your website is the most important asset you have in marketing. So we specialize in building scalable websites on HubSpot that convert the demand that you've created. If you want to find out more about our services and see real results that we've generated for businesses, visit blendb2b.com. So, to kick things off, Phil, I think let's cover off why so much marketing budget is wasted on these low ROI activities. Like, why are marketers still just plowing money into things that are just not proving effective pipeline and revenue? And I think, just to start us off, it stems from, well, one thing, a fundamental approach to B2B marketing and demand generation. When you are optimizing marketing strategies and tactics and channels for things that your buyers don't care about, for things that go against their behavior and their preferences to buy, automatically you're doing things that are going to be wasted ROI because your buyers don't want to receive those things and aren't receptive of them. They don't work in marketing.
Yeah. And that might sound a little sort of contradictory to listeners, given that on our last episode, where we talked about what works in B2B demand generation, we said that anything can work. And so to be here today saying that, marketers are wasting a lot of their budget, is kind of at odds with that message that anything can work. But the reality is that the things that will work and that will drive attractive, positive ROI are only things that are rooted in your audience insights, your buyer insights, aligned to their wants and preferences at this stage in time. I think the reasons that so much marketing budget goes to waste and is wasted, that there are many reasons, but not least, like you said, not enough of it is informed and aligned to the way buyers really buy. And the frameworks that exist for understanding that are really flawed and poor. And the degree of truth that's spoken, particularly in online communities, about what's really happening, working, having an impact, having an effect, is quite low. We see a lot of content, a lot of very good content, but there often lacks this sort of essence of hard facts, truth and demonstrable data to demonstrate that investment X had impact Y and this is why. And so sadly, too much marketing is done essentially in the hope that it will work and not in the knowledge that it will work. And I would like to think that every now and then we help people shift their position, from hoping that something they're doing will work and defending it despite facts and data indicating the contrary, to a position where they really are comfortable advocating for and investing their budget in things that are measurable in how they work. So there's definitely a few factors at play.
Yeah, and let me just backtrack then on my initial point, because, in the last episode, we said that anything can work in B2B marketing, which is totally true, but it stems from the fundamental understanding, like you said, of your audience and your buyers and what they truly care about.
Yeah.
If you get that right, if you understand them fully, then of course, anything can work because you do the things that work for them. But so often, marketers don't have that fundamental understanding. They'll do things that X company has said works for them and simply won't work for their business. So aside from the fundamental approach, I think, and again, like we do speak about measurement so often, I know, but there is just a lack of measurement in B2B marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the data that we as marketers typically look at isn't actually valuable in the way that we think it is. It's important data to inform parts of the process, optimization of channels, tactics, campaigns, etc. But too often it's used to indicate success or justify spend at a higher level.
Yeah.
And it's not suited to doing that. And people need to look further and beyond that sort of first line marketing data if they're truly going to inform themselves about what their buyers are responding to.
Yeah, and not many marketers are looking at activity and channels and overall marketing spend at an ROI level.
No, and it's 2025, and I'm still shocked at how many marketers don't have access or visibility to pipeline data.
It's crazy.
The software exists to do this. We've all got more than enough software at our disposal, and yet that critical connection is so often missing and considered to be too hard to resolve in many cases. And what's perhaps stranger is that businesses tolerate that. They tolerate marketing operating and acting in the absence of critical data.
Yeah.
And to some extent, sales suffers too, because although they can see pipeline, they can see which customers close and which ones don't, they can't draw insights all the way through the customer journey. They're operating blind in one direction and marketing in the other. The fact that that problem persists and is allowed to persist today is kind of crazy.
Yeah, totally agree. The next thing I would add on, why budget does go to waste so often is even if you're really good at creating and capturing demand, like you understand your audience, you're in the right places, you're saying the right things, your messaging is sound, so often people are then directing their audience to a really poor website with a poor user experience, disconnected messaging, a poor sales process and handoff from demo request or inquiry, whatever it may be. So all of that upfront investment you've had to capture that qualified website visit and that buyer and connect with them has gone to waste.
Yeah, websites are a bit of a blind spot, I think, for businesses and marketing. They're quite often owned or considered to be owned by different people to the people that are distributing investments to generate traffic and awareness and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, for some reason there's an inability to appreciate the degree to which underinvestment or failure to optimize your website for what buyers need from it undermines the efficiency, the ROI of your other activities. It's so easy to say, and we all know that a proportion of everything that we do in marketing results in people visiting our website. But our ability to sort of scrutinize that website and look at it through that lens is for some reason quite hard. But in many businesses, most businesses in fact, unless traffic is really small, in which case I might advocate for a slightly different approach, the website is a huge lever that you can pull on to potentially multiply the ROI of your other marketing channels, investments, and tactics. So yeah, it's really a key point that gets overlooked, misunderstood, and spend wasted on ultimately.
Same with the sales process, though. At the end of the day, you could have a fantastic, demand creation and capture and website experience, but the actual return on your investment can only be realized once sales has done their job as well.
Yeah, what I've heard and seen is that in a lot of businesses, particularly in SaaS and technology generally, data about sales processes is so good because pipeline data is so structured and well formatted that sales leaders and teams are in a relatively good position to measure and optimize the sales process. I'm not saying that's true of all businesses, particularly service businesses where it's a lot more scattered and varied. We know that firsthand.
Yeah.
But to some degree, businesses are in a better place with actionable data that's aligned to business ROI. And you could almost argue that marketers, when they're targeting people, not in market, top of the funnel, that sort of stuff, they're also in possession of relatively good data. But when it comes to that website, that moment of truth, when a buyer is on your website, will they convert, won't they convert? That's an area where data often lets us down. It's solvable, it's addressable, but it's a weak spot in a lot of marketing strategies.
Yeah, and I think, on the sales point, it's more around the handoff from website or high intent wherever it comes from to sales. Like, what's the disconnect there, and what's the initial experience you're giving to a buyer?
Right.
Because that's usually not a sales thing, sometimes not a marketing thing, and it's kind of this thing in the middle that nobody really wants to take responsibility for or optimize, but a crucial moment in the buyer journey.
Yeah, it's definitely something that can be optimized, often by marketing, with good effect.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we can give the listeners some common areas that we think and see that budget is wasted in demand generation, and explore some of these, and then identify specifically how businesses can look at their own data and see where budget is actually being wasted. But we look at so much data for businesses that we work with, like connections that we have the opportunity to explore that data, and the trends are there.
Absolutely.
The common themes always reveal themselves, that budget is wasted in common areas, ultimately.
Absolutely. All throughout the buying journey, where we're deploying our budget investments, there is waste, and that waste is quite often repeated across businesses, and as you say, it appears in the data that is shared by people online with the reports that they release, and it's backed up in nearly all cases at data we get to see inside platforms. So if we go all the way back to the sort of beginning of the buyer's journey, one of the biggest areas of waste is right there, isn't it?
I mean, ad spend.
Ad
spend, baby. That's the song, isn't it? Yeah, something like that.
Will be.
Oh, God, the waste in ad spend. I can't even tell you, the amount of Google Ads accounts that I've looked in and LinkedIn Ads accounts where they're just blowing huge amounts of budget on clicks that are just generating absolutely nothing for the business.
Yeah.
The primary candidate for this when it comes to Google Ads is branded search campaigns. And I don't want to get too tactical with this, but a few ideas and where to look here I think is useful. Branded search, I would just turn it off. In almost every single case, there may be a couple of arguments where your category is so competitive and there are so many other competitors bidding on your brand name where you need to defend yourself. But in most cases, if somebody is searching for your brand name, they've done their research. They are in a position now to find you and look at your solution.
Yeah.
They want to access your website. And if you turn off all of that branded search campaign, I really, really doubt that you'll see. And, how many branded search campaigns have we turned off now? A lot. The drop in inquiries and demo requests is usually nothing, because organic search just gobbles all of that traffic up anyway.
Yeah, so branded search might consume a lot of your budget by getting a lot of clicks, but they're clicks and visits to your website that you didn't need to pay to receive in the first place, because you're top of the organic results for that query anyway.
Yeah.
So those campaigns are candidates in most cases for turning off because of the amount of waste they represent. I think also as well, the other degree of waste is that businesses are very often running very broad match campaigns, very weakly targeted campaigns. And in addition, campaigns that are not aligned to the sort of bottom of the funnel. They're more aimed at the top of the funnel informational terms, where they won't get the same number of clicks as the high intent branded search, but the clicks that they do get aren't driving anything positive for your business either. Using paid search to promote a landing page with an ebook on it around an informational term isn't going to generate revenue for your business. So you're wasting that part of your budget in addition to the branded campaign budget, leaving only a very small portion of a typical search ads campaign is attractive in terms of ROI.
Yeah, even blogs. I've seen businesses, try and target top of the funnel keywords with blog articles and stuff like that, and it's just there is absolutely no point. The ROI on those things is just appalling.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that you create organic, I just said the word there by accident, organic blog content, is to rank organically in Google and have it support your SEO strategy for organic traffic. The thing is, because Google PPC is so expensive now, for competitive terms, we're talking all the way up to 50 quid a click now.
Right.
It is,
wow,
and beyond. It is outrageous. The landscape is just ridiculous. But at least 10 to 20 quid in a lot of cases. or dollars for our American audience. But yeah, you really need to be putting that budget in the places where you can actually capture buyers that are in market to buy. So, looking at those high intent keywords that people are searching for to actually find and research solutions. They are ready to buy, ready to explore products right now.
Yeah. So the only people that profit when B2Bs run these large, expensive campaigns really is Google.
Yeah.
Because the majority of the clicks that you can get are not going to contribute to your pipeline, no matter what you hope will happen. And again, there's that word. I've used it a couple of times already. I think if you're basing your decisions on hoping it's going to work out, whereas data demonstrates that more often than not it doesn't, then you need to revisit your strategy for these things.
Yeah. That moves us kind of onto LinkedIn, and it's slightly different here because I would pay for a campaign to direct somebody to a blog, or not an ebook, but a landing page of some sorts with some information on. And the nuance is different because on LinkedIn and other social platforms, you can target a particular audience.
Yeah.
On Google, the doors are wide open. I could pay 20 quid for absolutely anybody to come and click on that page, which is why, when it comes back to the high intent point, we need to make sure they're in market and ready to buy, because we don't want to waste that budget on somebody, a student who's just researching this topic.
Yeah.
Like, they're never going to buy from you. And if they do, it might be in 5-10 years time, at which point, that budget could be spent better elsewhere to get a better ROI.
Yeah, and a user's reason for being on any platform, be it LinkedIn or Google, is they're very different, and therefore the way they react to what you can pay to put in front of them is going to be different, and they have different roles to play in your demand generation strategy. Hence, very different approaches are justified and work. So where's the waste typically do we see in a LinkedIn advertising campaign?
I mean, you've got a couple of places, right? And we already mentioned gated content at the start, and it still blows my mind that businesses are still running gated content like there's no tomorrow, because there's nothing else left to say on that argument. Like,
so using LinkedIn advertising to distribute links to landing pages.
Well, and LinkedIn lead gen forms. So like LinkedIn lead gen forms look good in terms of platform metrics. You'll get downloads, and you might get an email address for £50 to £100, but all of a sudden, if you try and track that into pipeline and close one revenue, zero.
Yeah.
Because they are so low intent. They're often personal email addresses because they auto-populate from LinkedIn. They're just not converting into pipeline and revenue.
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? Because it might be nice to think that a lead gen ad solves a problem in the sense that it moves the form that was on the landing page closer to the LinkedIn user. But of course, it's in LinkedIn's interests and the interests of every platform to innovate new ways to get us to spend money on advertising. And by all means, we do have to try these things, but you've got to be really clear about what is going to produce results, what is driving revenue for your business, and focus your investment there and not waste it on things that are not going to produce favourable results. Yes, you might get leads that method, but if you're not getting pipeline, then you're not getting your money back, I suppose, is the ultimate bottom line on it.
Yeah. And the other thing with LinkedIn is just people go to absolute town on audience sizes.
Right.
And, I've seen some ginormous audiences for very niche products. And LinkedIn will give you recommendations. I think it's 150,000 at the moment, minimum audience size. You absolutely do not need 150,000 people in your audience to make it work. You choose the audience that's right for you.
Right.
If that's 5,000, that's fine. If it's 10,000, that's fine. If it's 500,000, that's fine. Like, as long as it is your target audience, it doesn't matter. Like, the audiences on LinkedIn are usually way too broad that you end up paying to target people, pay for them to click on your website when they're just not in your ICP. They are never going to buy from you.
Yeah.
Like, that targeting needs to be so refined and so neatly packaged, like, for your audience and your product offering. So, like, you need to remember here that you are paying for these people to see your ads and to click on your ads. Like, do you not want to make sure that that is the most perfect person that you would want to sell to? Like, absolutely.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in B2B, casting your net wider simply doesn't, unfortunately, drive more of your ideal customer into your pipeline. If it did, then all these investments would be totally justified, right? And it would be like, go crazy. But sadly, again, a lot of that budget goes to waste if you're not targeting really well-defined, clear, and usually quite small groups of people, whether that's Google Ads, exact match keywords, very high intent near the bottom of the funnel,
Yeah.
or your audience in LinkedIn. You got to keep it small, you got to keep it focused if you want to see ROI.
Yeah, and I can talk about LinkedIn ads all day, but the last point I want to make is just the creative on the platform. The creative that you produce for, a billboard ad or even like a Facebook ad or any other channel might not transfer into LinkedIn. Like, you need to be really intentional about the creative that you use on there, about the copy that you use, because every channel is different and has its different nuances, and LinkedIn is definitely one of those. And I've seen some really amazing creative ads that just perform terribly in terms of like click-through rate and dwell time and things like that. I've also seen some really terrible, creatively put together ads that are scrappy, look hideous, like to the eye, perform great in terms of click-through rate. So produce the ad that's right for the platform.
Yes. Probably the wasted, the waste in terms of creative there is pretty small compared to the waste in terms of ad spend, right? But like you say, the ad that will perform may not be the most carefully created one that might just blend in with the majority of what's there. I think standing out is one of the key success factors, isn't it? Like, getting people's attention for a moment in an unconventional way is at the moment having a good impact.
Yeah.
And you don't typically get that through highly polished corporate creative, I would say. You need to take a slightly different approach. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is. How do you feel about events? Now I think advertising's gone.
Well, events, I mean, a tricky place for sure. For a lot of businesses, events will represent a huge expense done for maybe not perfectly understood reasons, poor measurability, meaning an awful lot of it could be very, very wasteful. The marketer's challenge is to identify what part of their event strategy is contributing positively to business KPIs, and to be ready to cut back on or pull out of events or event formats that are not likely to produce the influence or the measurability in terms of the buyer into the pipeline and beyond. So events are potentially a great format, right? A great place to meet your buyer face to face, to talk to them, in a very in a long format way, depending on whether we're talking here about virtual or physical, of course. But just as easily a great source of waste too.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the huge trade shows and corporate events in your sector, we're talking hundreds of thousands here, millions to sponsor events. And there's a huge problem with data and data capture at events, which means it's really hard in a lot of cases for marketers and even, sales to actually identify the true ROI of things. A lot of events, I was speaking to a business a few weeks ago. They go to a lot of events. They're in a particular niche. They have no way to capture data.
Right.
Like there is no, badge scanning facility because it's like a small event, a really tight niche and not that many people there, but the people that are there are exactly the person they want to be talking to. Then how do they capture that data? Like, so often it's not captured. It's in a notebook somewhere, and then it's not attributed. And look, we slam attribution sometimes when it's credited, but you need to attribute these things back to a particular event at times, and so often they are not. The data is so separated, and you just can't see what you actually get back.
Yeah, it's a challenging one. I think there's two risks with event marketing as well, with events, particularly the in-person physical ones where you spend a lot of money to be present on the stand. And one of those is that people very positively review or assess their conversations at events, their experience at events, because one, it's really nice being in amongst people and experiencing them. And while you're there, you've got nothing else to do but try and have positive conversations with people. So it leads to a sort of overstated optimism, I think, about what the impact will be in many cases. And to some degree, those events might not be that dissimilar to those branded search campaigns. Like, did you truly need to be at that event for a buyer to know that they want to talk to you about your solution or product? Or is it simply paying quite considerably to sort of get a click that you were going to get anyway? So I think you've got to be really, 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 really careful about scrutinizing your investments with care. And the reality, and it's a hard one to accept, is that a lot of businesses probably wouldn't see that much harm, that much negative impact on their pipeline creation if they weren't to go to their large industry events. It might not have the big impact that they fear it would. Now, I'm the first to admit that that can be quite a scary idea to test.
Yeah.
And I don't have a solution for that, but you do want to be looking at your events through a lens that helps to tell you whether they are having a positive pipeline impact one way or another, and if not, strongly consider your presence there.
And what are the alternatives? If we don't go to this big corporate trade show and invest 500 grand in it, can we have a closer-knit dinner? You know,
Right.
I've heard this from people in communities and stuff that have all of a sudden decided that the ROI wasn't good enough for all the big trade shows that they sponsor. So instead they, hire a private venue, invite 10, 20, 30 customers and people they actually want to sell to as well, have an informal chat, talk about their challenges, build up a closer connection, more affinity. You spend more time with them, understand them deeper, and get better ROI in the end of it because it's so much cheaper as well.
Yeah, taking more of an ABM approach to events where you talk to smaller groups of ideal customers or existing customers and ideal customers can be really beneficial in a number of ways, both in terms of pipeline creation and the insights that you gather. Ultimately, it's a business's job, and ideally the job of their marketing leadership, to put investment where it can have the biggest impact. So, for example, if we're talking about potentially not investing in an event that you've gone to for a number of years, it's not a case of saying, well, that money is not going to be invested there and it's not going to be invested anywhere, and therefore we're just going to lose some impact. You can put all of that money into the things that your pipeline data can probably help you determine are already having incredible impact and do a whole lot more of it. And that's the real job in marketing leadership, to take investments and move them from underperforming channels into higher performing channels and optimize them. And you can always come back and retest and test new things once your foundations are effective and your ROI is good. But you want to be putting as much of your money as possible into high performing, strategies within your go-to-market.
Absolutely. It's our job to scrutinize that investment at every single level. And events are one area that probably don't get enough scrutiny, ultimately. And I think, to go back to your earlier point, there is a lot of positivity when you get back from an event and feel good factor. We spoke to loads of customers, loads of good conversations. Yeah, because nobody's going to go to an event and start talking to you and say how bad you are and how they really don't want to work with you, because we're human and we're polite when it comes to things like that.
Absolutely.
So there's this real massive optimism when you get back from an event, and you might need to book in within a time frame that doesn't allow you to realize that ROI. And just be careful of that and make sure that you've got historic data on that event that you go back to fight against the optimism. Because I know sales love events, right? We all love events, to be fair.
Totally.
The hype that you get from an event, the buzz, it is great. But act with data and probably not emotion, I would say.
Yeah, and there's a similarity here with advertising, which is if you use sort of in-platform metrics to measure the success of something, then you might miss something crucial. So, for example, from an event, if you measure data that's collected at the event and you use that as a measure of success, i.e. number of conversations had, number of business cards collected, number of leads gathered, that's more than likely going to give you a misguided impression of that event's success. You need to look over a longer period of time further down the funnel, further down the pipeline to understand the real impact and see whether people are mentioning that event during the sales process, in self-reported attribution, for example. If the leads that you met there became pipeline, became revenue at any kind of rate, you need to take that broader view, as you do with a lot of marketing, to understand the real business impact of that investment.
Yeah, and I failed to touch on this at the start when we were kind of talking about why so much marketing budget is wasted, but a lot of the time businesses don't give enough time to realize ROI. And, that is probably a big thing when it comes to events, because a lot of the time people attending those events aren't in market to buy. You're just trying to influence their later buying decisions. But that's also true for a lot of marketing activity. If all we were doing was trying to capture in-market buyers, we'd only ever kind of run Google ads and look at listing sites and where buyers are, actively trying to research and purchase. But, as marketing people, like our roles and the way that we want to influence people is so broad, and the journey starts early on.
Yeah.
So you need to give yourself enough time, and that time is going to be different for everything that you do. There's no silver bullet here. But give yourself enough time to actually prove the ROI of something. Don't just turn it off after 2 weeks if you haven't, had a closed one deal, even though your sales cycle is a year.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. You do need to allow yourself time. And when we're talking specifically about events, in-person events, trade show events, you probably want to allow pretty good timeline to measure that impact.
It depends on your sales cycle length as well. At the end of the day, like, you need to try and identify the things that you can earlier, I'd say, to that. Look at pipeline. It might be a particular stage in pipeline that then gets held up for 6 months or whatever, in complex sales, it might be. And look at what you can further back from revenue if that time horizon is too far away, and then make an educated decision on that.
Yeah. Are virtual events a less wasteful area of B2B marketing in general, or is there waste there too, do you think?
Well, I think in general, because they're so cheap and easy to run, less waste.
Yeah.
Like, I've only ever seen less waste and more ROI in virtual events like webinars and live events and things like that, because they're so easy to put together.
Yeah. I suppose again you can mistarget anything, can't you? You can misoptimize and mistarget any medium or any format, and harm the ROI that you see from it. But there's a lot of good that you can do with virtual events if they're produced for the right reasons, distributed in the right way, and measured correctly, ultimately.
Exactly.
Yeah. Another area where businesses are wasting a fair amount of money is in the creation of content and experiences that are optimized around lead generation. Ultimately, any effort that you go to as a business to produce content that will be gated for the purposes of generating a lead, and then to create more content that we'll use to nurture those leads, and then the software, the headcount, the resource that goes into managing those programs, trying to optimize them over time, it's all largely wasted. The data for most businesses shows it clearly. The people that buy from you are not the people that download your content by converting, by divulging their personal details, and therefore not the people that receive your nurturing, aka spam, emails, not the people that click on them, not the people that reach your lead score threshold. They are the people that avoid all of those things. They're the people that remain anonymous to you, completely untracked by your software, until they reveal their intent on your website, often at the bottom of the funnel. So any of the spend that's going into creating content and optimizing it around that goal of creating that lead early in the purchase process is wasted, and it trickles out into how effective your content is from an SEO perspective, how effective your content is from an AI search perspective, how effective it is at influencing your buyer to any degree, and you're optimizing against all of those outcomes. So a big bit of budget is going to waste if you're spending it optimizing your content for those things.
Yeah, and we kind of just touched on that at the start, right? That poor ROI often comes from doing things that don't align with buyer behavior and buyer preferences, and gated content is absolutely one of those things. And if you are producing gated content, like, you are wasting budget at the end of the day, because all you're trying to do is try and manipulate and force buyers to a stage in their journey that they're not ready for yet. Like, they need to go through their own research, build their own affinity with brands, and you can do all of this stuff and try and influence this along the way without being pressurized and pressuring buyers into the next stage of the journey, ultimately.
In fact, you have to. The data shows it clearly. And yet, the types of strategies that are ultimately aligned around lead generation are quite often staunchly defended by people executing them. And that goes back to the data point, which is if they could only look at their pipeline data and determine where buyers come from in terms of the data that they're generating as a marketing function, they would see so clearly that it is not people who are, convinced to become leads and then nurtured via email.
The other one that I've got on my list of common areas budget is wasted is software.
Right.
Software. I've got an issue with software. I've got a gripe. Like, people think that just investing in a piece of software will suddenly solve that particular need. Like, oh, we have an ABM strategy that we want to run. Let's go and get this piece of software. Oh, we want to do outbound. Let's go get this software. Oh, we need intent data. Let's get this software. But it doesn't solve the fundamental strategic problem of getting that software in the first place. Just getting software will not solve the problem.
Yeah.
It might help you relieve the issue once you've got the strategy in place, but it's not going to give you the best approach to solve the issue and the problem why you're even thinking about software.
Yes, businesses have typically much more software than they need.
So much software.
So much of it is poorly implemented or hasn't been properly implemented at all, as in there's been no effort to train people on how to use it or how to adopt it. And as you say, no amount of software on its own solves a problem. It requires people to use that software and follow and apply a process to get the most out of that software. And yet in marketing, there is a tendency to procure software as though it is going to solve the problem of going to market in that particular way, and the reality is so often different. There was a stat that said that in order to be successful, a company needed to spend 5 to 6 times on services what it spends on software in order to realize the value of that software. And yet I'm afraid I think businesses operate in quite the opposite scenario, where it's not unusual to want to spend a fraction of what your software is getting you, at a broad level, on the services to make it work. Now, of course, your own headcount can make it work as well, but quite often it's external expertise that's needed to really take a new strategy and implement it rapidly, successfully, fully, in some areas.
Why do you think that is? Is software seen as like this sexier thing that people want to invest in more than the service to get it implemented and get it right? Like, why is it?
Yeah, I think people view software as reliable in the sense that it's machines doing their job over and over again. They can't fail. Choosing the right people to do a job is incredibly hard. And so we all shy away from it. We all fear making the wrong choice. And sadly, there have been lots of occasions where people have been burned by those choices, but it doesn't remove the need to do it. So I think software is viewed as being more predictable, more reliable, and therefore a safer way to spend money. And then I think ultimately there's a degree of propaganda at play, which is there are large, loud voices that are not always completely, I don't want to say honest. I think they're honest, but I don't think they necessarily fully explain what it takes to implement an effective strategy, and it can be really hard to pick out the true essence of what will work if we do it, what won't work if we do it, what are these voices recommending to us, and is it the solution to our problem? There's just so much noise out there, and it's not all fully fleshed out.
Yeah.
Yet another area where marketing budget goes to waste is websites. Interestingly enough, most businesses are not spending nearly enough on their website. They need to budget and spend more on it in order to optimize their website for the opportunity that it presents in terms of converting buyers into high intent leads and making all your other marketing efforts work that much harder. But typically website budgets aren't formulated to include strategy and copy in addition to design and development. So the budgets for websites are typically too small. But when they are invested in, the budget is often wasted in addition to being too small, because websites are rarely tackled from a position of optimizing for buyer behavior and conversion. There's very little consideration in a lot of website projects for data-driven decision making, the application of research best practice, the optimization of the design, the structure, the copy, the UX for the buyer, not for the business building the website. And so sadly, even when businesses go to the effort eventually, typically every 3 to 5 years, of summoning up the courage and the budget to replace their website, they don't replace it with something that's fundamentally better, because they don't build it around what's required to turn an interested buyer into an opportunity in their pipeline. And so businesses really ought to, I think, reframe the way they think about their website from a occasional cost to be minimized to something that should always be invested in, measured, scrutinized, and improved. Because if you adopt that mindset, you could start to generate some really quite impressive business results that would justify even more investment in the future. And as we said at the start, when you look at the data that's available inside most businesses about how can they increase their marketing ROI rapidly, the website's the lever to pull. Increase the conversion rate on your website into essentially pipeline, and you can 3x, 5x, 10x the impact that the rest of your marketing is having on your business.
Yeah. I mean, so many businesses create things on their website that buyers just simply don't care about. I think a particular one that springs to mind most recently is audience-based navigation and industry pages, sector pages, however you want to frame it. Those pages that speak to particular, audiences that ultimately you want to sell to. And the data just proves time and time again. The research is out there by Nielsen Norman Group that these pages do not work. Your buyers don't visit these pages. They don't care about them. I literally saw the other day that one business, from their homepage, their navigation, products, 40% of clicks, industry drop down, 0.5%.
Yeah.
Their buyers simply don't want to go there. And yet, businesses are still wasting money on creating that content.
Yeah, there's another place that has an impact, which is that websites typically grow over time. But a lot of that growth isn't beneficial and is effectively just bloat. And the problem with website bloat in B2B is when businesses come to, reach that point where they can no longer tolerate the website they've got and they want to invest a certain amount of money in replacing it, it's very hard to get away from wanting to replace it all. Lock, stock and barrel the way it is currently. But a lot of that content, in a lot of cases, isn't being frequented by the buyers that actually go into your pipeline and buy anything. It's maybe getting some visits, but probably nothing in comparison to key pages that buyers are looking for: homepage, product, service, pricing. And yet you're going to spend a portion of your budget rethinking, rewriting, hopefully, redesigning, redeveloping sections of your site that may not be aligned to what buyers want. And so if businesses are able to look at their data, properly through buyers' eyes, and identify the parts of their website that are critical to the purchase journey, and build those things and invest all of their budget in creating that website, they'll always have the power to add that content back in later. Working with a reputable company, you should have a framework that allows you to publish new content, new pages with ease, but you haven't spent your budget on creating those low value, low ROI pages. You've invested it in building the best possible site around core content, core information. So whenever I see a sitemap and it's massive, my first thought is, how much of this website do buyers care about?
Yeah.
Probably not all of it. And that's an opportunity to certainly make your budget go further and work harder for you, and not waste it in the same way.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, I think we've covered off some key areas to go away and look at after this episode. Ad spend, events, software, gated content, website. Go ahead, look at all of these things. There will be wasted budget in there. 100%. It happens to all of us, and, just be mindful of that. So for the people listening, I think we need to just finish off. How do they avoid dumping money into poor ROI activities in the future? Like in their specific use case, how to identify that wasted budget and just avoid it in the future.
So identification starts with measurement, right? Looking carefully, looking closely, looking truthfully at data. And the most important data is pipeline data, revenue, split funnel analysis, if you can do it, in conjunction with all of your other marketing touch points, self-reported attribution too. Get a clear picture of what's producing pipeline and revenue for your business and what isn't. And consider moving your investments from low-performing areas to high-performing investment areas. Now, we've talked about things that people will no doubt want to test over time. But one of the problems that I think we see happening quite a lot is that tests don't feel like tests because they're not executed against the backdrop of a solid foundation. So marketers feel unable to turn off things that aren't working, unable to give things long enough time to prove they are working, all sorts of challenges around making changes to their investments because the foundation isn't present. So, I think that businesses need to start by implementing an inbound demand generation platform, which is proven to work, ungated content distributed freely for consumption in platform where buyers are optimizing for search, taking them through your website in a way that's conducive to conversion rate. Implement that inbound demand generation platform first as a marketing team, and you've got a foundation on which you can effectively test absolutely anything, and yet also turn those things off when they don't work in the confidence that your core results are still going to be there when you do turn them off.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have much to add to that other than we do bang on about inbound demand generation on this podcast, but for good reason. It's a solid, proven methodology that we've used ourselves and for customers time and time again to get repeatable, sustainable, measurable results that give you that solid foundation of results that you can use to, put more resource, more budget into, and then test on the side, and then introduce new channels, new tactics, new strategies to get you to the next level.
Yeah. It's also a great way to align your marketing to the buyer behavior of today, get measurable results out, and it's also something that you can easily optimize and grow with more investment once you see it working, in addition to helping you to expand into new channels, new methods, and new tactics.
Awesome. All right, well, let's wrap it up there. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Demand Decoded, and you've got some tactical advice there as well, and more holistic advice on where to look for wasted budget, because there is just so much of it out there. It probably won't be the last that people hear from us on wasted budget and measurement. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.